This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak have been trying to convince voters that they should get their vote in the upcoming general election at a special Sky News event. The audience in the key target town of Grimsby challenged both men on their main concerns. A snap poll by YouGov suggests nearly two-thirds of those asked believe the Labour leader performed best. Hello there, you are watching the press preview live from Grimsby. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Well, it's time to see what's making the headlines with The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and Sky's election commentator, Adam Boulton. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Daily Telegraph is reporting that Labour's manifesto will not rule out increasing taxes. The Times front page focuses on the Labour leader's pledge to make growth and prosperity a priority. The Mail describes Sir Keir Starmer as squirming during our programme and carries Conservative warnings about a Labour supermajority. And unsurprisingly, the Grimsby Telegraph splashes with tonight's event, picturing both leaders campaigning in the local area. Turning to tomorrow's Labour manifesto launch, The Eye says the party is planning a series of spending cuts across government departments and won't be making any new spending commitments across the public sector. The Guardian reports that Rishi Sunak's chief parliamentary aide, Craig Williams, placed a bet on a July election 3 weeks before the Prime Minister called it. He doesn't deny that he did it, but says he understands how it looks and will cooperate with any investigation. In other news, the Metro speaks to a man who was injured and whose partner and children died when his e-bike battery exploded, causing a fire. According to the Financial Times, the International Energy Agency believes the world's supply of oil will outstrip demand by the end of the decade, causing prices to drop substantially. In the Mirror, the mum of Nottingham stabbing victim Barnaby Webber has opened up about the family's hell since his death a year ago today. The Sun reports that England footballer Phil Foden and his partner have consulted a psychic ahead of the Euros. And the Star tells us that the England team will be given special dispensation to cover up at their German hotel's nude spa. Thank goodness for that. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined again tonight by Jack Elsom and Adam Boulton here in Grimsby tonight. They've been here for our leaders event, the Battle for Number 10. Now going to take us through the papers, and we're going to start with, as we should be starting with, the Grimsby Telegraph. Adam, take us into their front page.
Well, their front page shows the two leaders arriving here in Grimsby, just behind us, in fact. And what's interesting, really, about it is that this was about two men, Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, but as far as we know, they never actually met. They came in separately, they did their sessions before the audience separately. There may have been something behind the scenes, but they were very particular that they didn't want to meet. And so, really, that meant that people got to focus on them each individually rather than, if you like, the argy-bargy in a debate. And perhaps it ended up that they were both, you know, a little bit more exposed than they have been in other encounters or at question time, for example.
And Jack, what did you think about that? That it was sort of, I suppose, less combative because they insisted on not meeting each other?
Yeah, completely. Obviously, different formats have different merits. One of the good things about this one for voters is that they couldn't pivot into an attack on the other. They couldn't take some flack and then sort of throw that back at the other person. Well, you know, you say I'm doing this, but the other person would do it twice as worse. And so they were exposed with this. Obviously, the Grimsby audience tonight didn't disappoint. These are the exact type of voters that they are going to have to win over if they're going to be wanting to become the next Prime Minister. Obviously, went Tory in 2019 with Boris Johnson's massive landslide, was Labour for a long time before that, big Brexit voting area, fishing town. It's all the sort of things that Keir Starmer is desperate to claw back, and at the moment, it looks like he's probably going to do that.
And I've got to say, Grimsby gave it a really warm welcome, as we can see, cordoning off the area that was needed for this massive outside broadcast. A lot of people turning up outside earlier on when the leaders were arriving, demonstrations. So I think that, you know, one should take one's hat off to Grimsby as well. And again, that's something different from all the other election events we're seeing. This really gave you a flavour of real people and the politicians.
They didn't go head-to-head, but Rishi Sunak, from my memory, did refer to Sir Keir Starmer. He hasn't got a plan for immigration. He's not saying what he wants to do. So he did try to make it combative, even though he wasn't in the same room with him at the same time.
Oh, yeah, he pulled no punches, you know. He was often attacked on, you know, taxes, migration, NHS. He is saying that Keir Starmer's got no plan to do it, playing into that sort of Tory playbook that Keir Starmer is playing it very, very safe. He's not prepared to really put his head over the parapet and say big, bold things that he would do differently. He doesn't want to rock the boat. On the contrast, Sunak, for the past few weeks, it's been a complete policy blitz. You've seen, you know, national service, you've seen tax cuts left, right and centre, stamp duty cuts. The manifesto was a, you know, festival of goodies and giveaways. Starmer, on the other hand, playing it much more safe. He doesn't want to rock the boat.
But it was interesting that it actually took a long time for the Prime Minister to get onto that attack. It was almost as if he sort of woke up for, oh, I've only got 5 minutes to go, I better get the attack lines in. And even then, as Jack said, he didn't try and repeat this rather controversial £2,000 tax claim. He just said, generally, Labour will put your taxes up, I'm cutting them. And I think one of the most telling moments in his time was when Beth Rigby raised what Ed Conway had done, actually analysing the spending plans, showing that they're going up. And he basically pleaded the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah.
You know,
Said he hadn't seen.
I don't know anything about that.
He hadn't seen the projections. Do you think he was a little bit... I mean, we'll have a look at the Sun front page. Grim evening, I think, their headline. Do you think the Prime Minister was a little bit subdued at the start of the debate, because the D-Day commemorations, that was mentioned fairly early on?
Yeah, and the polls show that this massive D-Day blunder, which he's rightly apologised for, has actually cut through with voters. And a lot of the time in Westminster, we can think that a row is dominating the country, whereas actually it's just pretty much contained within London. I think this was one of those moments where actually, wherever you are in the country, it really did cut through. It hurt, and I think Sunak has recognised that, and you know, it was brought up today, I think twice, once by Beth Rigby and then once by a member of the audience, unprompted. It's clearly, it's clearly got him, you know, very struggling at the moment, and I think that, you know, he's tried to neutralise that and put the row behind him, but it's just going to stay in people's minds. You know, as much as you try to almost rip the plaster off early with that apology, it does something, you know, it is something that's got to him, I think.
I think the worst moment for him was that lady, quite late on, who just said, look, I'm a Conservative voter, lifelong Conservative voter, but she actually brought up the parties as well under Boris Johnson. Then she mentioned D-Day, and she just said, look, I can't support the Conservatives right now. And I think, you know, according to the opinion polls, she's speaking for quite a lot of people in this country at the moment. And, you know, Sunak can only raise his hand. And, you know, she even made the point that Rishi Sunak had actually got a fixed penalty notice for the parties, so she wasn't even letting him off the hook.
Do you think, Jack, that he simply can't get away from this now, and that really has been the turning point in the election campaign, that he can't claw back from that?
It's so difficult. If you look at the polls, they really haven't shifted since 2023, when he first became Prime Minister, or near enough anyway, you know. And as Lyndon Crosby, the great Tory strategist, used to say, you know, you can't fatten a pig on market day. He's been trying beyond hope to put radical policies in the minds of voters that he hopes will make them sit up and consider voting for him. The problem is that for so many of them now, they are just putting their fingers in their ears and they're not willing to listen. We've got 3 weeks to go until the election. Now, potentially, you might have some huge moment of significance that does something to shift the needle, but it's going to have to be bloody well big, because at the moment, they're not shifting at all.
And the most significant thing, as you say, Gillian, has been the D-Day business, you know, to which he hasn't really got an answer. He just has to say, you know, I apologise, I hope you've got in your heart to forgive me, which is, you know, it's not a great way to be going into an election.
Yes, and with the D-Day commemorations, it wasn't a gaffe, it was a deliberate decision. I think that's what makes it very difficult for people to understand, and especially when he wasn't rushing back to do a live interview. It was a pre-recorded interview, played out tonight, incidentally. There didn't seem to be a real reason.
Well, actually complains in that interview that things overran.
Yes. Compounding.
You could make the argument he was trying to be just polite, though, to his interviewer.
Well, he was being polite, but it's sort of revealing of his attitude, I think, to the whole
It's
thing.
uncomfortable in the context of what happened, definitely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, and the fact we're still talking about it obviously just goes to show how damaging it is to him. But I think that most people, when they saw the pictures on that beach, probably just thought that they just want to be there for that moment, you know, 80th anniversary. For many of those veterans that stormed those beaches, it'll be the last time. And no matter what schedule you've got, you probably just feel like, no, actually, I have to be there rather than anywhere else, and that's why it's so bruising for him.
Just lastly on that, Adam, do you think we know the full story? Do you think that there might have been another reason that he had to rush back?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we know that this was discussed in advance, on the day, and afterwards. And on all occasions, he just simply felt he didn't need to be at that final international commemoration with the two presidents and the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of Germany, you know, and it's just a misjudgment.
Let's take a look at the Times, page 6 and 7, the headline there from Sunak, I'm doing my best. Jack, do you believe that the audience tonight thought that the Prime Minister was doing his very best?
Well, I think they gave him a fair hearing. Obviously, it's incredibly tough for him because he made lots of pledges when he first became Prime Minister. I think it was January 23. He made 5 pledges, and Beth Rigby, quite rightly, took him through all of them. Now, you can say that you've cut inflation. You can, you know, how much credit you can take for that. Obviously, people will lay it at the door of the Bank of England a lot of the time. I think that's reasonable. But he's ticked that one. Growth. You know, at the moment, obviously, you got a sort of a smidgen of growth last month, but actually, you know, throughout his tenure, it has been pretty sluggish. And then you look at NHS waiting lists, hasn't made progress. Small boats, well, they're currently higher than they were last year, tracking higher, coming across the channel. And so it's very difficult for him now to come out and say, my record has been a stonking success, because as Beth put it to him, the numbers don't lie.
But I mean, he did sort of make the admission that he knows it's been tough for people. He can understand their frustration and their anger, but things are improving.
Yeah, but the problem is, when you say, I've done my best, the voters are at liberty to say, well, yeah, but it's not good enough. You know, and that, in a sense, was the position which he was in, having to make the best of a grim situation, which it was quite clear, you know, he wasn't the only one who had contributed to that. Although people did seem in the audience quite willing to personalise it, you know, again, picked up on his support for Brexit and the consequences of it, which obviously in this area, which was heavily Brexit, blamed the European Union in part for the destruction, or in large part, of the fishing industry. But, you know, when it came up, that question from Beth Rigby linking immigration and the increase in immigration to what was promised at the time of Brexit, you know, the audience went silent.
There were gasps at some point.
They were persuaded.
There was a point there where Beth Rigby read out the numbers for the 3 years after Brexit. Net migration was about 1.9 million, a figure the PM didn't seem to know. And then the 3 years before Brexit, it was about 800,000. Now, many people in this area would have voted for Brexit for one of the key pillars of it, which was to control migration and to control the numbers coming in here, using freedoms which leaving the EU afforded us. And the fact that the Tories, for 14 years, David Cameron, the tens of thousands, after that, Boris Johnson pledged to get it down, Rishi Sunak's now pledging to get it down again, people just don't believe them anymore on that. And they've pledged some big radical policy about a net migration annual cap. Problem is, for a lot of people, they just think it's too little too late.
Yeah, he did actually go a bit further, the furthest we've heard him so far, and gave a date for the first flight to Rwanda, didn't he?
Well, he's always been saying that it's going to happen and take place in July, but then, you know, the question came back to him, well, in that case, why didn't you wait for it to prove that this policy is working? I think, you know, we've seen another survey today showing that there's a great deal of scepticism about politics and trust. And, you know, you can say it now, but if you're saying it before it happens, people just don't seem to be prepared to take it on trust.
But he did, I think it was the 24th.
24th of July, yeah.
Is that the first time we've heard
It came out in High Court documents last week, but it's the first time I think he has openly admitted that that is exactly when he wants to send flights to Rwanda. Obviously challenged as well about the timing of the election and the timing of Rwanda flights, because the smart money in Westminster for a long time is that he would call an election in the autumn to allow time for Rwanda flights to get off the ground. He could then point to maybe some dip in numbers coming across the channel and could say to Keir Starmer, look, I have a plan to stop small boats. What are you going to do? Because you said you'd axe this on day one. The fact he doesn't, so the fact he didn't do that is seen by a lot of people as a tacit admission that potentially actually he doesn't think it would lead to a dip in the numbers, and then actually he would have egg on his face if that happened. Now, he's obviously committing to that doggedly, and he's still going into it, the election, with that Rwanda pledge. The problem is now is that it might never happen.
Adam, take us to the Mail. Keir Starmer, prospect of a super majority.
Now, this is actually very interesting because this comes out of an interview on the radio, I think it was on Times Radio, that the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, did this morning in advance of today's event. And he was saying, don't allow Labour a massive majority because it would be very bad for democracy. It's always bad when a party has a big majority. And that was taken by many people as being really a tacit admission that even someone as senior in the Conservative Party as Grant Shapps doesn't think they're going to win, and he's now in the business of trying to talk down the size of the defeat of the Conservatives. And certainly a lot of the focus of Conservative policies have seemed to be aiming at that. Now, the message coming out of Conservative headquarters was, you know, Grant Shapps, you know, shouldn't have said this, overspoke a bit, even although they've been sending out advertisements putting out the same message. But now you're seeing the Daily Mail absolutely go for it and simply repeat what he said, that, you know, you don't want to create what they're calling a one-party socialist state. So we're seeing a real effort by the Tory supporting press or the right-wing press to frighten people, if you like, into not voting for Labour, which is different from voting for the Conservatives.
Yeah, he seemed to say the quiet bit out loud, Grant Shapps, and a lot of people in the party are thinking this is now an exercise in damage limitation, not something, as Adam said, that Tory figures out tonight in the spin room were keen to repeat. James Cleverly, Mark Spencer say, oh no, we still think we can win this. And I think that, I don't know about you, but I think that you have to carry on as if you can win it. You have to go out with a Richter's grin and kiss babies' foreheads and say, I can still be Prime Minister on July the 5th. Otherwise, everyone might as well just give up.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's not true. You know, they haven't won until they've won. And, you know, anything could happen in the next 21 days. So I don't think this is helpful, frankly, to put it out there. Although I have to say...
Adam and Jack, you can talk much more at the top of the hour. Thank you very much. Coming up next, Sky News at 11. It's 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended news review and press preview, live from outside the Grimsby Town Hall, the home of the battle for number 10. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak have pushed on the cost of living, the NHS, education and immigration.
The numbers are too high. Of course they're too high. What I can tell you is what I've done since I've had this job, and that's last year. Yes, and the numbers are too high. I'm not making any bones about that. The numbers are too high, Bet.
Well, nothing in our manifesto requires tax rises over and above those that we have specifically set out.
No tax rises in the next Parliament?
No tax rises needed in the plans in our manifesto.
In the plans?
No tax rises.
After questions from Sky News and from the audience, tax was one of the main issues tonight. We'll cut through what they said in our campaign check. We're in Grimsby, one of the key target towns of this general election campaign for both parties. Over the next hour, we'll be discussing today's news with our reviewers, Jack Elsom and Adam Boulton. And later, we'll have a full run-through of tomorrow's front pages. Good evening and a warm welcome to a special news review and press preview live from Grimsby. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer have been